If you are new here, my name is Rejoice. If you're coming back, hi. So in today's video, we're going to be having ourselves another mini sermon Monday. But before we get into that, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. Please leave a comment in the comment section and don't forget to share the link. So let's get straight into the video. So before we start, I suggest that you pause and say a quick prayer asking the Holy Spirit to help you to understand what we're going to be talking about, because it's only through Him that we understand anything basically that has to do with God. So do pause and say a quick prayer inviting the Holy Spirit to help you to understand. As you can see from the title of the video, today we are going to be talking about giving yourself entirely to God. So we are quickly going to read from 1 Timothy chapter 4 verse 15. Meditate on these things, give yourself entirely to them, that your progress may be evident to all. Okay, so the verse we just read says that we should meditate on these things, not read, but meditate. So basically meditate on these things and give yourself entirely to them. And then it says that when you do these two things, then your progress, like the progress that will take place in your life, will be evident to everyone. Basically, when we meditate on the word and when we give ourselves entirely to God, the positive change that will take place in our life, it will be so big that everyone around us will notice that change. So I'm just going to go into 3 points on how to give yourself entirely to God. And before we get into that, what we mean by giving yourself entirely to God, we basically mean loving Him wholeheartedly and also serving Him wholeheartedly and living for Him. So tip number 1, which will help with you giving yourself entirely to God. So the first thing is that we shouldn't nurse the things of the devil. And basically what that means is that when we have certain habits that are not from God, we shouldn't just sit back and do nothing about it and think that they are harmless, because nothing from the devil is ever harmless. Obviously, when he wants to tempt you with something, he will make it seem harmless. Meanwhile, it's not. Meanwhile, it's eating away from our relationship with God. So reasons why we shouldn't nurse things from the devil is because when we do that, we're actually making room for him in our lives, because he can control us through that little thing that we are refusing to fight against. When we see that we have habits that are not from God, we should fight against them and refuse to have such habits in our lives. Because when it comes to nursing such habits, it will start as one thing and then that one thing will lead to another thing. For example, if someone has a stealing problem, let's say, stealing will lead to lying, because if you leave the house, you will steal, and they ask where you're going, you're not going to say that, you're going to end up lying. This is a very minor example or whatever, but if one happens to have a habit of stealing, from stealing you have to lie in order to steal, if that makes sense. So it will go on and on like that, and you will start to have more and more habits that are not from God. So as soon as you realize that you're about to get used to a habit that's not from God, fight against it. And when you do that, it will help you to give yourself entirely to God, because the devil won't have any control over you. Also, another thing with these things, it's not like when you decide that, okay, fine, I'm going to just try work on this habit and basically try work towards giving myself entirely to God. It's not like when you take that decision, now the devil stops tempting you with this thing or he stops coming at you. No, it doesn't work like that. So even after you take that decision to start working on this habit, the devil will still come and try tempt you with that very habit, because he knows that you're struggling with it. So with that, it goes back to putting your body under subjection and making sure that your spirit is the one, your spirit is the dominant one. And also, for you to be able to fight habits that are not from God, you will have to be radical, you have to be serious in order for you to fight and conquer one of these habits. And obviously you won't fight the habit alone, you'll need God. And then point number 2, which will help you give yourself entirely to God. The point is basically remembering that we are in a spiritual battle. a spiritual battle, not a spiritual game, a battle. We in war spiritually. So keeping that in mind and remembering that will motivate you to give yourself entirely to God, because we know that spiritually we can only conquer when we have God. So when we give ourselves entirely to Him, we are basically guaranteed to conquer. So with this, I'm just going to quickly read Ephesians chapter 6 verse 11. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. So as we can see in the verse, it talks about putting on an armor, and people usually put on an armor when they're in war to protect themselves. So this verse tells us to put on the whole armor of God so that we may be able to withstand whatever it is that the devil throws our way. You can just go and read Ephesians chapter 6 from verse 11 downwards to see what these things are, because there's the sword of the Spirit, there's the shield of faith, and just other things that we need to put on in order to stand whatever it is that the devil may throw away. And also another thing to remember is that our opposition, the devil, doesn't rest. One thing about him is that he's very persistent. So if we don't take the spiritual battle seriously, then we'll be defeated, because the devil takes the battle seriously. The third point is that we shouldn't love the things of the world. And with that, we're quickly going to read 1 John chapter 2 verse 15. Do not love the world and the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So since we are in the world, we'll obviously be involved in the things of the world. So the verse is saying that we shouldn't get too caught up in the things of the world and forget about God, and forget the reason why we're put on earth, and forget that we have a race to run. So with that being said, we should make sure that we make time for God. We should fellowship with Him. And not only just make time as if other things are more important, we should actually have our eyes fixed on Him and have Him as a priority. Lesson of today's video was that we should work towards giving ourselves entirely to God. And that basically means serving Him wholeheartedly and living entirely for Him. So 3 points that will help with that. Number 1 is that we shouldn't nurse anything from the devil. So we shouldn't nurse any habits that are not from God, because that way we are giving Him room in our lives. And then the second thing is remembering that we are in a spiritual battle and we need God. The last thing is not loving the things of the world. So basically not getting too caught up in the things of the world, and having God as a priority, making sure that we put time for Him and not giving Him leftovers of our time, but putting Him as a priority. And yeah, that is it for today's video. If you enjoyed, please give the video a thumbs up. Please leave a comment in the comment section, and don't forget to share the link. Thank you so much for watching. That is it for today's video, and I'll be seeing you on Wednesday.